This is not a case for doomerism. If you're an optimist, it's only great. If you're a techno-optimist, there is a problem. Techno-optimism is not just about positive feelings about innovation and progress. It's a belief that current problems, stemming from deep systemic root causes, can or will be solved with artificial intelligence or some other future technology. I'm gonna build a case as to why this is not gonna happen. I'm not gonna argue that technology is bad or good. What I'm gonna argue for is that relying on future technologies is a broken promise based on no evidence or fact. Techno-optimism has become a trend since about the mid-2010s. This is when suddenly wealthy tech entrepreneurs started giving out speeches and talks, writing instant bestsellers and featuring in popular podcasts, amassing millions of hits. Now it's a well-funded campaign hell-bent on convincing policymakers that wealthy investors will figure out what's best for all of us. The basic premise of techno-optimism goes like this. We don't need to invest in robust public transit in our cities. We can just dig single-lane tunnels for taxis to drive through them. We don't need high-speed rail. We'll have hyperloop and electric cars. We don't need a living wage. We'll have automation doing all the hard work for us. The wealthiest class is the single largest contributor to climate change, but we don't need to tax the rich because in the future we'll have carbon capture to offset their emissions. We don't need a systemic reform today because we'll have a technological solution in the future. Techno-optimism is a toxic mindset that weaponizes positive thinking to perpetuate structures that cause their problems and gild everyone who speaks out against those structures. I have more than enough to build my case against techno-optimism, so let's do this. The AI hype we are currently drowning in is obnoxious and annoying. It stems from this baseless assertion that AI will just continue to improve indefinitely until one day we'll reach a Star Trek utopia. This will never happen. The logic behind this religious belief goes like this. If you assume any rate of improvement at all, AI will eventually become so much better at everything humans do that human labor will become completely obsolete. Sounds legit, right? Except that's a big assumption that has no basis in fact. There is no evidence that AI will continue improving in the future or at all for the matter. It is much more likely AI will get worse and prohibitively costly to maintain. It sounds like I'm speaking heresy, so what's going on here? Contrary to the infinite growth hypothesis, AI learning capacity has a limit and plenty of constraints on improvement. One of those constraints is training data. This is mostly applicable to all generative AI models. Most training data today still consists of information coming from the real world and real humans. AI learns from this pool and generates new content, but then that AI content becomes part of the training data for a next generation of the learning model. Eventually, the AI-generated data in the training pool becomes poisonous and the model deteriorates. With each new iteration, the errors build up until the AI reaches its model collapse. This phenomenon has been well documented and observed at virtually all generative AI tools. Even trace amounts of partially AI-generated data becomes poisonous. Every major generative AI model is vulnerable to this, and this constraint has no clear solution other than hoarding historical data from pre-AI time, which is bound to become irrelevant and inapplicable in future situations. Another constraint is resource cost. Not all AI is generative, but all AI is very expensive and resource intensive. An AI-assisted search, for instance, requires 5 times more energy than a conventional web search. Large AI systems are predicted to require as much water and energy to run them as entire states and countries. By 2027, the global demand for water for AI will reach half of the UK's total consumption. It's an elephant in the room, as admitted by Facebook AI researchers, that no one hyping up this tech dares to mention. AI won't solve our problems. It's a useful tool for targeted applications, but anything broader than that is agony. The sooner we get off this AI hype train, the better. Some techno-optimists believe that the energy constraint will be solved with nuclear power, or more specifically fusion. The implication of this idea is that we don't have to lower our demand as long as we can produce more energy indefinitely. A minor caveat in this is that fusion energy at scale is, as far as we know, a pipe dream. It's theoretically possible, but there is no evidence fusion plants will ever become commercially viable in the future. But let's say we live in a sci-fi scenario and somehow we could transition all of our energy needs to nuclear, fusion or otherwise. Here's the major problem. Water. Nuclear plants, like all power plants, are essentially just steam engines. They need water to generate electricity, and they need even more water to cool the plant down and be more efficient with the fuel. Only 2 energy sources don't need water to operate: solar and wind. Nuclear is obviously cleaner than fossil fuels, but all power plants will eventually run into the water problem. They often withdraw from local freshwater sources, which leads to increased pressure and depletion. But it's not just withdrawal that's a problem. A much bigger problem is the discharge. Any water exiting from the power plant is going to be a lot warmer than natural water sources. This thermal pollution is destructive to wildlife and can collapse aquatic ecosystems. During heat waves, the only solution plants can mitigate this problem with is by shutting down. Using salt water or wastewater introduces the same problem. There is no way out of the water and energy constraint other than scaling down. The demand for energy must go down, and with it, we'll have to scale down AI, data centers, blockchain, cloud computing, and other energy-intensive technologies. Big data centers running the backbone of internet today are already at a tipping point. They need excessive amounts of water for cooling, as well as excessive amounts of electricity for operation. For both of these, they cause a major pressure on local water sources, much more so in fact due to their electricity needs. Data centers have already reached an efficiency ceiling, so improvements won't make an impact. There is no such thing as infinite growth. But what about renewables? Solar and wind do not have to face the water constraint, but they do face another problem.
Water!
Wait, what? Renewable energy must replace fossil fuels unless we're okay with displacing hundreds of millions of people out of their homes. But renewable doesn't mean infinite. Solar and wind technologies are driving the demand for mineral production to insanely damaging and unethical levels. If we want to keep global warming below the 2-degree threshold, we'd have to at least quadruple the mineral needs for clean energy, with the demand for lithium growing by over 40 times in the next 2 decades. But mining and processing of lithium and other minerals still requires tremendous amounts of water and energy, on top of land grabs and unethical labor practices often employed in these sites. Due to water and energy constraints, mineral mining will be extremely vulnerable to shocks, and price volatility will destabilize global markets for these raw materials. All of these issues apply much more to fossil fuels, so they absolutely need to be phased out. But there is no technological miracle waiting to save us. We will have to scale down our demand, which will require changes in social and economic structures globally. But techno-optimists don't want to do that. They propose that we can keep doing everything as usual, we'll just have to do it greener. Nowhere does this manifest more clearly than in electric vehicles. The idea is that if we transition from gas-powered cars to electric, we'll reduce emissions of the transportation industry. But this is a prohibitively unfeasible goal. In less fancy words, it's not gonna happen. If the United States transitioned to all electric vehicles, it will require 3 times as much lithium as is currently produced in the entire world. That's the United States alone. Now remember that lithium is not an isolated source. Its extraction and processing requires excessive amounts of water and energy, neither of which we have enough of if you also care about growing food and hydrating humans. This is why I cringe whenever I see someone praising EV trends. It's a socio-environmental disaster riddled with human rights abuses and colossal pollution. So we can go all electric, or we can reform the transportation industry by investing in public transit, walkable cities, and recycling. This would reduce the demand for lithium by 90%, which is also a much faster and safer way to reach net zero emissions. The techno-optimism movement is starting to morph itself into religion. Its wealthy thought leaders, footing the bill of scientists, journalists, influencers, and YouTube channels, are proposing an idea of energy miracles as a futuristic solution to our dire environmental and socio-economic problems. I'm not being hyperbolic here. Techno-optimists under billionaire leadership literally believe that at some point in the future, technological innovation will advance so far it'll be a miraculous breakthrough. This is the strategy they are banking on to solve climate change. An example of such a miraculous technology is carbon capture. Heavily lobbied for by the fossil fuel industry, billionaire venture funds, and Kurtz's Act, carbon capture technology relies on removal of CO2 from the atmosphere and storing it underground. Carbon capture is still mostly at the prototype stage, with no scientific backing that it could ever scale in the future. Huge amounts of energy are required to run these facilities, energy that many argue could have been allocated much better to phasing out fossil fuels instead. Carbon capture is a dangerous gamble that is highly unlikely to work out and could result in a global catastrophe when implemented at scale. Safely storing carbon capture would require building millions of miles of pipelines that could rupture under pressure at any moment and release CO2 back into the atmosphere hundreds of times faster than a gas leak. We could start capturing CO2 just by stopping deforestation and restoring forests, but it's not a multi-trillion-dollar business as carbon capture would be if the lobby persuades decision makers. Carbon capture has no feasible business model. The only way it could ever work would be with massive public funding. This then makes carbon capture technology the biggest wealth redistribution program from poor to rich in history. Miracles do not exist. No miraculous technology will solve climate change, not even renewable energy. Nothing will help unless the demand for energy is lowered and fossil fuels are phased out. Neither of these things is happening because we are still waiting for a future innovation, that at some point in the future there will be green cement and green steel, even though that's unproven, and we could instead use different materials and design less resource-intensive buildings. If you want to be optimistic, there is plenty to be optimistic about. We don't need to wait for future technologies that may or may not solve our current problems. We already have solutions for most of the problems we face. We can start transitioning to regenerative materials. We can invest in public transit and high-speed rail. We can lower our energy demand by banning planned obsolescence, fast fashion, and other anti-consumer practices. There is way more that we can already do than I can mention here. The reason we don't do these things is that many of the currently available solutions require politically hostile decisions. If you advocate for public transit, it's a program you will have to fund with the wealth of centi-millionaires, and it will undercut the entire automotive industry. If you advocate for a phasing out of fossil fuels, you threaten the bottom line of the owner class holding major positions in publicly traded petrochemical companies. The media discourse is oversaturated with techno-optimist hype. Anytime a tech investor pours money into a new technology, there is an article about it hyping it up as if it was already proven or viable. YouTubers and influencers are just regurgitating the news and are straight out paid through sponsorship to promote it, then get butthurt if you call them out for it, and their cult followers will eat up whatever excuse they come up with. Not being a techno-optimist doesn't mean you have to be a doomer. Be active, call for the solutions that already exist. You have way many more rights you can exercise than vote at a ballot and vote with your wallet. That's such an insulting bullshit. One of your rights is to support my channel through whatever means you can. Share, comment, and subscribe to my Patreon. Thanks.